Sprigatito. Our old card drew out from your deck, and it could draw evolution cards too, rather than simply basics. This is generally extremely useful, and much better than the negligible damage of the new one. For Floragato, however, I think the new card is much better, since you do almost as much damage and can reliably attack with a turn 3 evolution, which is especially likely thanks to Quick Grow Extract. Smoliv has 2 new cards, including an unreleased promo. The Paldean Wonders one does 10 damage and heals Smoliv, while the promo version heals anything for 20. Normally, I advocate for the damage, but being able to heal allies is kind of neat, and you could go either way. Wiglet's original card hits a random target for 30, the new card hits the defending Pokemon for 20. If the opponent only has a single card, the old one is flat better, and the damage to bench mons is potentially very useful for Cyrus pulls later on, giving you more freedom. I'd always run the old one. Both Dondozo cards have extremely expensive attacks you're unlikely to ever use. Both basically require the Tatsugiri that allows them to retreat for free, either to get them out into your energy ramp or Wild Swing Gyarados, or in the new one's case to attack on the turns where you're recovering from Giga Impact. Apart from those Wild Swing Gyarados decks, I've never seen any potential tech for this card. It's too pricey even if you're running something like Baxcalibur. Obviously the old Tatsugiri is required for those Dondozos, but it's pretty much useless besides that. The new one looks much better. It's just a water-type version of Oricorio Sensu, which in my opinion is an underrated card. That being said, you only lose at most 2 Pokemon a game, and this is near useless on every other turn. We actually had a Palmy line all the way back in Shining Revelry. The new one does less damage but can hit any target, which I think is generally much more useful thanks to Cyrus. That 10 damage on Mega Absol is probably going to be huge in the endgame. The 2 Palmos are identical to our 2 Floragatos from earlier, and just like before, I strongly advocate for the new one. It's interesting to note that both Palmot cards work with Nemona. The old one has a free retreat cost and a permanent Rocky Helmet effect, while the new one has to discard an energy, yet the new one gets an impressive 30 more damage. 70 on 2 is a fine threshold, but 100 is noticeably better, and if you consider Nemona, you get 150, which is a great benchmark to kill even EX Pokemon, or 180, which is enough to kill even some Megas. The new one is probably a little better due to the extra kill thresholds it passes, but honestly both are probably viable cards just thanks to the sheer amount of power Nemona brings. The old Tadball ramps energy while the new one attacks. I know the new one has more HP, but I'd always run the old one since Bellibolt EX's damage bonus is tied to the number of energies in play, which means you get the power boost 1 turn sooner on the old one. Honestly, this one is a really hard call for me. Gimighoul's old card flips to avoid all damage, while the new one is the same as Continuous Steps Eevee. The old one makes you more likely to survive to a Golden Go late game, but the new one offers a fantastic X factor. Sometimes you're just gonna get 3 heads and kill a basic on turn 2. I'd probably run the old one personally, but you could easily go either way. We now have 4 Mankeys. The highest average damage is technically the promo, which reliably knocks out babies, and additionally sets up the Primeape, which gets bonus damage if wounded. But you're already a 50 HP Mon, so you're getting uncomfortably weak before evolving. The Focused Fist one is also quite strong, but if you hate flipping or want more HP, the original's probably the best. I wouldn't touch the new one personally. Obviously, Annihilape only needs 1 energy, so getting into it with Rare Candy is very strong, but notably, Primeape has some pretty great cards, and Memory Light will allow you to use its attacks even once you hit your stage 2. The original is a bit stronger than Annihilape and doesn't lose HP to attack, which can come in clutch. The middle one has a nice consistent damage, and the newest one does 30 plus however much HP you're missing, which works really well with Annihilape's 140 HP and self-damaging effect. Any of these is viable, but I think the original is probably the best card in and of itself, even if it costs an extra energy. Definitely the latest one is good though, since most things can't one-shot Annihilape, and it can go up to 160 damage for a single energy. The 2 Paldean Tauroses are different types. I wonder when we'll get a water one. Paldean Wooper's old card poisoned the opponent. The new one needs an extra energy, but does impressively more damage in 1 hit. Obviously, if you're using Clodsire EX, you'll want the original, and honestly, maybe you'd want it anyway, just because it'll be able to attack more consistently. Old Strudel has 10 more HP, but needs a Dark Energy specifically to attack. The new Grafaiai is colorless, and you might even run the old Grafaiai in an off-color deck, so in those decks you'll prefer the new Strudel. As for Grafaiai, our original was a staple in Venoshock decks, though it was never too crazy, and it's honestly somewhat outclassed by Poison Barb. The new one has a very gimmicky effect where you do 90 damage on 1 energy if you have 3 different energy types in play. There probably is tech to use this with a bunch of different energy ramp babies, alongside something like Serena and Mega Kangaskhan, and maybe even Juggler. But in most decks, running 3 energies is completely unviable. The old Tinkatink attacks for cheaper and has higher damage across 2 turns, and you probably won't be a Tinkatink for longer than that. Tinkatuff's new card loses HP but gets cheaper retreat, plus it has a higher average damage. But you lose an extremely valuable 60 damage threshold, so you might still consider the old one. Running Memory Light on Tinkaton is actually a consideration since it lets you attack on Gigaton hammers off turns, and 140 into a reliable 50 sounds good. Varoom trades damage for HP. You can go either way. Old Reveroom's effect is quite good, but it was just a bit too pricey before. Honestly, with cards like Orthworm nowadays, it's probably viable, and the turns you successfully stall might help you set up a late game Golden Go or something, especially with Metal Core Barrier or Will. But cards like Altaria and Hydreigon obviously one-tap it otherwise. The new one is just a middle game attacker, and while it's not horrible, it's not worth considering. I really like new Tandem Mouse's damage output in the early game, but that HP is really bad. Additionally, the gimmick value of getting to deploy all your mice at once on the original is extremely valuable. You'd obviously run the original if running the old Mousehold, but you might run it anyway with the new one, just to draw out your deck a bit. As for Mousehold, the energy destruction effect on the new one is actually extremely busted, but your HP is terrible, and once your opponent sees this card, they can just start setting up something on the bench to revenge kill you. It's obviously viable, especially with the potential trapping effect on high retreat Mons, but it's countered more easily than the old one, for example by things that can attack with 1 energy. The old Cyclozar was an alternative to Farfetch'd, having more HP and the same damage after the first attack, but I think both are outclassed by the 1 energy Furfrou now. The new one is like Silvally, but costs an extra energy and doesn't need to evolve. The new one is probably playable with babies, but I doubt people will touch it other than maybe beating the step-up battles with no EX decks. Finally, we have Flamigo. Amusingly, this normal type Flamigo has the same average damage, but more HP and a more ramp-friendly type, as well as a different weakness. Fighting is very good for hitting weaknesses, but neither card looks viable. That's the last of them, thanks for watching.